Healing is one of the most important things to master early on in your Grey Zone Warfare experience. It'll quite literally keep you alive and playing the game longer, and understanding when you can keep fighting, when you need to pull back to heal, as well as how to deal with your injuries quickly will make you a far better player and allow you to have much more enjoyable experience while playing the game. There's nothing worse than trying to use every medical item in your bag and nothing is working, and then you slowly see yourself slip into a coma and die. Now thankfully this is a game that isn't actually what's going on, but if you've experienced Escape from Tarkov, you're a step ahead of most players, as the healing system will probably be familiar to you, but there are some intricacies and some neat tricks that will help you in the long run. So let's start with probably the simplest thing to acknowledge, the health bar. That's the real basics. There are three main vitals you need to keep track of when it comes to playing Grey Zone Warfare. The most important of these is your blood level. It's quite literally your HP, if you want to think of it like that in simple terms. You lose blood by bleeding, as you'd expect, and if it falls too low, you'll see yourself slipping into a coma, and in this state you'll need a friendly PMC to come by and fix your wounds to get you back on your feet. I think around 2,000 or 2 litres is the lower limit of blood before you slip into a coma. I've got into 2.2 litres. It was pretty miserable, but I lived. As blood decreases, you'll notice side effects such as a redness spreading around the screen and blurriness that will really affect your vision, and this obviously gets worse the lower your blood level. Your blood does regenerate over time, and this is a big difference to Tarkov. Your health essentially does regenerate over time, but there is an upper limit. I have regenerated around 2 litres of blood with no additional help, so carrying blood bags is not necessarily essential, but they certainly speed up the process significantly. So speaking of blood bags, what are they? Well, there's 2 varieties you can get from the traders or finding them in the world. There's a small bag and a large bag. Small bag takes up 1 slot, large bag takes up 2 slots. Small bag gives you 1 use, large bag gives you 2 uses. Pretty straightforward. You can use them on yourself or on your teammate, and they'll give you a boost of about half a litre of blood. They're pretty quick as well, which is quite nice, so you don't have to stress too much if you're low on blood. You need to use one in a fight. If you get some cover, you can probably pull it off in enough time. Outside of blood, the other main metrics to keep an eye on are your food and hydration levels. Again, these get too low, you'll experience things like dizziness and fatigue, but food and hydration, like water, energy drinks, those sort of things, are very plentiful in Le Mans, so there's no real excuse to not keep these top at all times. A lot of the AI are carrying food and drink on them anyway, so just keep grabbing it as you see it and consuming it over and over again. It's a good habit to get into. Now you might be thinking, okay, we've talked about blood bags and food and hydration, but how do you actually use these items? Well, there are 2 ways. Either in your inventory, you can right click on an item and select use, or on the health screen, you can drag a medical item on the relevant area. There'll normally be a little pointer that you can see, or the limb will be glowing red, or the organ will be glowing red, something like that to show you the affected area. You can drag the item on there and it will start healing for you. You then can use one of my favorite systems in Grey Zone Warfare, and that's the hotkey system. Any consumable that is in one of your containers marked with this lightning bolt symbol, which will be your chest rig, tactical belt or pockets, can be used by pressing the relevant hotkey. So for instance, for medical items, if you hold down H by default, you'll see all your available healing items in those containers appear on a scroll list. Scroll to the one you want to use, press H again. This is essential when you're in a fight and need to heal yourself quickly without messing around in the menus, so I always make sure things like bandages and tourniquets, which I'll get into, are on my hotbar so I can use them. It's also really important if you're trying to revive a teammate out of a coma or heal them, you can only do so with items that are in your pockets or your chest rig, items that you can access quickly. So if you're struggling to bring a teammate around, make sure your items aren't in your backpack because you can't use them on a teammate. The same also works for grenades on G by default and provisions such as food and drink on P. So now let's get back to actually repairing wounds. We're going to go through the different tiers of wounds as I see them, starting with your most basic wound. Sometimes, as you'll see in this clip, you'll get shot and see that your body has taken damage by seeing that red marker on your player stance, but there are no adverse effects such as bleeding. or you'll look at your health screen and you'll have wounds, but again, no bleeding or other effects. In this scenario, you don't really need to stress about healing quickly, but you can use a bandage or gauze to repair these injuries and remove any pain effect. If you're familiar with Tarkov, think of bandages and gauze, kind of like a combination of medkits such as AI2s and actual bandages, as they repair both wounds and stop things like bleeds. So now we move on to bleeding, which is probably the thing that you should be most concerned about and something you should react to the quickest in a combat scenario. First off, you have light bleeds. These are represented by one blood drop symbol. These are very slow and not overly concerning, and the bleeding effect is slow enough that you can carry on fighting for a good few minutes before you really have to worry about dealing with them. I've also had instances where they resolved themselves. I'm not sure if that was just a bug or if that is actually reliable, they will just heal themselves. I don't know. In any case, a bandage or gauze will put a stop to any light bleed and effectively stop you losing any more health. Next up, you have heavy bleeds. This is represented by 2 or maybe more blood drops in the same symbol. Your best and most efficient way of dealing with this is a tourniquet to the affected region. Your tourniquets are labeled a few different ways, but there'll be the black boxes labeled CT, there's also the red ribbony type one, there's also a simple red one. There's a few different ones in the game, they all do the same job and they will stop heavy bleeds dead. And now with heavy bleeds you do need to act fast, as your blood will drop rapidly. You will slip into a coma pretty quickly if you don't act. Now I have fixed heavy bleeds with bandages and gauze in a pinch, but it's very slow because you'll go from 2 blood drops to 1 blood drop and then from 1 blood drop to no blood drop. And the animation for bandages is a pretty slow animation compared to that of a tourniquet. I wouldn't recommend it, but obviously no tourniquets. Don't panic, just start bandaging everything. You should be alright. Next up, we have fractures. These wounds are more irritating than anything, as their biggest impact will be to either your arm or leg stamina, so they'll affect you running as far or how you aim your weapon. And you'll see that by the added red bar to your stamina gauge. For arms in particular, you'll find aiming your weapon much more difficult, so while they aren't life or death, I would recommend fixing them. And you can alleviate some of the symptoms by using pain medication, but this is just a short-term fix, and a splint is the only way to fully recover. If you're using the health screen, you can see which limb is damaged on the health screen, as it will be marked yellow, and a splint will take about as long as a bandage to repair the damage. Currently, operators seem to have pretty weak knees, so do be careful sliding down any hills or jumping off any roofs of any height. Next up we have organ damage. This is probably the most terrifying thing when you see it come up on your screen, but don't worry, it's relatively easy to solve. This is something obviously none of us would have to deal with in a normal life, but you will be surprised how many times your lungs need repair in Le Mans. Organ damage will come with some sort of side effect, such as coughing, dizziness, or worse, and can only be repaired by using a surgery kit, although side effects can again, similar to fractures, be limited by the use of pain medication. Important to note, the darker the colour of the organs, the worse the effects will be and the more damage they will have taken, so further damage such as blunt trauma will put you closer to risk of death. Yellow generally means you can keep running around fighting if you need to, just you'll have that annoying coughing going on in the background. Unlike most healing, surgery kits are not a quick fix, as you'd expect, and because organ damage will not cause death quickly, you can still fight through the injury if you need to. I would recommend getting somewhere safe or having your buddies protect you, because it is a pretty slow process and it's annoying if you keep having to cancel the animation and then start it up again. And actually, as another quick tip, right clicking will cancel any animation. So if you've started accidentally using the wrong medication or you started doing surgery when you don't want to, just hit right click and your character will cancel the animation pretty fast. Final tips. It can be overwhelming dealing with all these healing mechanics if you're not used to it, but what I will say is my top tips are to keep a healthy supply of bandages on you at all times and make sure they're hotkeyed by being in your pockets or in your chest rig. Bandages and tourniquets will keep you in most fights and at least alive long enough to get you back to base to do any more permanent repairs such as blood bags or surgery. Taking a small blood bag in your secure container is also wise, along as with one of the small surgery kits that only take up one block. This will leave you with half your secure container free for valuable loot such as keys. Medical items generally aren't that expensive, such as bandages, tourniquets, things are pretty cheap from the traders right now, so I wouldn't be too worried about losing them if you die. And gauze in particular is pretty easy to find on AI or loose in buildings if you keep your eyes open. I hope you enjoyed this guide to healing. Stay safe in Le Mans now. and subscribe for more content. Cheers, guys. I'm just going to pop some painkillers. I'm sure that'll help my brain injury. I love that you can do brain surgery. Just
That's so funny. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I performed like lung surgery earlier.
Yeah.
So myself.